All right. So we're back again doing the reading out loud to YouTube. So far, this has definitely been working to get me to. It's definitely been working to get me to do the reading. So I figure, why not just keep doing it? Like, if it's been working this far, might as well keep going and see how we go. All right. So today I'm reading Lenin and the Vanguard Party. There's a short little snippet right here explaining a little bit of background. Lenin and the Vanguard Party was a series of articles by Joseph Seymour published in Workers' Vanguard in 1977, or between 1977 and 1978. The following text is based on the Spartacist League pamphlet of 1978, but incorporates some corrections made in the Spartacist League's second edition of 1997. So, cool. I actually don't really know who the Spartacist League is, but I have heard about them quite a bit. Let me actually, before I get started, I wouldn't mind looking that up to see what that is. Why am I typing when I can copy and paste? Copying and pasting for me is so much nicer than actually typing shit out. Like, I know that's extremely lazy, I think, in some way, but yeah, I really prefer that. All right. So, according to Wikipedia, the Spartacist League is a Trotskyist political grouping, which is the United States section of the International Communist League, Fourth Internationalist. Formerly the International Spartacist Tendency, the Spartacist League named themselves after the original Spartacus League of Weimar Republic in Germany, but has no formal descent from it. The League self-identifies as a revolutionary communist organization. In the United States, the group is small, but very vocal, and its activities within leftist activist coalitions and wide-scale social justice protest movements usually focus on presenting a pull for regroupment and recruitment of subjective revolutionaries on the basis of an internationalist Bolshevik Leninist program. Interesting. All right. Good to know. Good to know. Let's see here. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm really reading the first two essays in this collection, though, because I cannot do more than that right now, and that's where I'm at. I will do more reading tomorrow. All right, so this first one is called Kautskyism and the Origins of Russian Social Democracy. Recently, the British International Marxist Group, IMG, and the International Socialists, now Socialist Workers' Party, and the International Socialists, two of the largest groups of the British far left, have taken to revising the history of the Bolsheviks. these groups have attempted to deny or obfuscate the principle of democratic centralist Vanguard Party by pointing to those elements of classic social democracy retained by the pre-1914 Bolsheviks, as well as to Lenin's tactical maneuvers against the Mensheviks. The IMG, British section of the pseudo-Trotskyist United Secretariat, has formed the remarkable feat of making Lenin out to be a unity above all conciliator on the grounds that until 1912, the Bolsheviks and Mensheviks were formerly factions within a unitary Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. The aim of this particular revisionism is to justify a grand unity maneuver for the British left. Their line is that the political differences which Lenin and Trotsky considered would be contained within a united organization. Were vastly greater than those which divide the revolutionary left in Britain today. For an extended treatment of the IMG's revisionism and its shabby tactical purpose, see IMG turns Lenin into a Menshevik, Workers' Vanguard number 164, 1st of July, 1977. The most ambitious rewriting of Bolshevik history is that of Tony Cliff, longtime leader of the Workerist Reformist SWPIS International. Yeah, I'm not gonna. Okay. The Cliff tendency today sports a left veneer. Sometimes they even parade around with portraits of Lenin and Trotsky. But this group had its 4th of August long ago, when in 1950, under the pressure of intensely anti-communist public opinion, it refused to defend North Korea against U.S. imperialism and broke with the Trotskyist movement over this question. And yet this utterly shameless CIA socialist now presumes a lecture on what Lenin really meant to say in What Is to Be Done. In the past, Cliff has been a prominent, explicitly anti-Leninist purveyor of Menshevism. His 1959 pamphlet, Rosa Luxemburg, states, for Marxists in the advanced industrial countries, Lenin's original position can much less serve as a guide than Rosa Luxemburg's. This bald statement was deleted from the second edition, but Cliff's substantive position remains the same. However, the Cliffites are nothing if not trendy. In contrast to the 1950s and 60s, hard Bolshevism is now in in among young leftists. So recently, Cliff has written a seemingly sympathetic biography of Lenin, of which two of 3 projected volumes have appeared. Here, Cliff presents Lenin in his own image as a nationally limited workerist eclectic. Cliff's central message is that there are no Leninist principles or even norms on the organization question. Lenin's attitude to organizational forms was always historically concrete, hence its strength. He was never taken in by abstract dogmatic schemes of organization, but always ready to change the organizational structure of the party to reflect the development of the class struggle. Organization is subordinate to politics. This does not mean that it has no independent influence on politics, but it is and must be subordinated to the concrete policies of the day. The truth is always concrete, as Lenin reiterated again and again, and this also applies to the organizational forms needed to undertake the concrete task. In other words, whatever works at the time, do it. Genuine Leninists recognize the primacy of the principles embodied in the first 4 congresses of the Communist International over pre-1914 Bolshevik practice. Furthermore, Trotsky, in building the Fourth International, systematized and deepened Leninist concepts developed in rudimentary form during the revolutionary turmoil of 1917 to 1923. To deny the evolution of Bolshevism from 1903 to 1917 is to obliterate the principled position of Leninism to Kautskyism. to appeal to the pre-1914 Bolshevik practice against the democratic centralism of Trotsky's Fourth International is equivalent to citing Lenin's democratic dictatorship of the proletariat and peasantry against Trotsky's permanent revolution. The first volume of Cliff's biography, subtitled Building the Party, ends in 1914. This work mentions Kautsky exactly twice, and the Second International not at all. Such an incredible omission warrants dismissing Cliff's book out of hand as a serious study of Lenin's position on the party question. From August Bebel's offer in 1905 to mediate the Bolshevik-Menshevik split to the Unity Conference arranged by the International Socialist Bureau on the eve of World War I, the international leadership played a significant role in the internal life of the RSDRP. The pro-unity elements, in particular, above all, Luxemburg and Trotsky, sought to achieve through the German-centered international what they could not attain within the Russian movement. Lenin was a revolutionary social democrat, and as Cliff himself noted in his second volume, Kautsky had been the only living socialist leader whom Lenin revered. This is actually an overstatement. In 1905, when Kautsky supported the Mensheviks, Lenin was harshly critical of him. Let's see, hold on, I lost my place. Okay. An understanding of Lenin's position on the party question must therefore begin with the orthodox Kautskyan position. This was the doctrine of the party of the whole class, or one class, one party. Kautsky's party of the whole class did not mean the recruitment of the entire proletarian population to the party. He recognized that the political activists within the working class would be an elite minority. It did not mean Kautsky is part of the whole. Oh, interesting. Hold on here. An understanding of Lenin's position on the party question must therefore begin with the orthodox Kautskyan position. This was the doctrine of the party of the whole class, or one class, one party. Kautsky's party of the whole class did not mean the recruitment of the entire proletarian population to the party. He recognized that the political activists within the working class would be an elite minority. No social democrat denied that membership standards involved some level of socialist consciousness, activism, and discipline. What the Kautskyan doctrine did mean was that all tendencies regarding themselves as socialist should be in a unitary party. Kautsky maintained that revolutionary social democrats could unite and even have comradely collaboration with non-Marxist reformists. Thus, the leadership of the German social democracy at various times collaborated closely with the avowed reformist, eclectic French socialist, Jean Jaurès. The SPD leadership was immensely proud of their party's disciplined unity, which they regarded as the main source of its strength. Bebel/Kautsky played a decisive role in the 1905 reunification of the French socialists, overcoming the split between the Marxist Parti Socialiste de France, led by Jules Gustet, and the reformist Parti Socialiste Français of Jaurès. I cannot pronounce this. I can pretend to speak. I do not know how to pronounce French words, like, at all. That is all just me trying my best and struggling because I do not know. I hope I'm not fucking it up too bad. If anyone out there's like, if anyone sees this and they speak French, all I can say is, one, I'm sorry for messing it up, and two, how do you pronounce this? All right, let's go ahead and keep going. The SPD leadership was immensely proud of their party's disciplined unity, which they regarded as the main source of its strength. Bebel, Kautsky, but oh wait, no, I already read that. I'm not walking into that pronunciation issue again. No. Let's just move on. During the campaign to reunite the French, the International adopted the doctrine of one class, one party in resolution form at its 1904 Amsterdam Congress. In order that the working class may put forth all its strength in the struggle against capitalism, it is necessary that in every country there exist, vis-a-vis the bourgeois parties, only one socialist party, as there exists only one proletariat. Therefore, it is the imperative duty of all comrades and socialist organizations to make every effort to bring about this unity on the basis of the principles established by the international congresses. A unity necessary in the interests of the proletariat, before which they are responsible for all fatal consequences of a continued breach. End quote. Before World War I, Lenin never challenged the above principle and on occasion affirmed it. When in 1909, the Bolsheviks expelled the ultra-leftist the ultimists, from their ranks, Lenin justified this by contrasting the exclusiveness of a faction to the inclusiveness of a social democratic party. Quote, in our party, Bolshevism is represented by the Bolshevik section, but a section is not a party. A party can contain a whole gamut of opinions and shades of opinions, the extremes of which may be sharply contradictory. In the German party, side by side with the pronounced revolutionary wing of Kautsky, we see the ultra-revisionist wing of Bernstein. In practice, in Russia, Lenin strove to create a disciplined, programmatically homogeneous revolutionary vanguard. Until World War I, however, he did not break principle with Kautskyism, Kautskyan doctrine of the party of the whole class. The resolution of the dialectical contradiction was one of the important elements creating Leninism as a world historic doctrine, as the Marxism of our epoch. Kautsky's analysis of opportunism. The Kautskyan doctrine of the inclusive party was predicated on a particular historico-sociological theory of opportunism. Opportunist tendencies, he argued, were a survival of petty bourgeois democracy carried mainly by the intelligentsia and conditioned by the economic and ideological backwardness or immaturity of the working masses. The growth of the proletariat and its organization would eventually strengthen revolutionary social democracy. Thus, Kautsky could tolerate a current like Jaurism as a kind of inevitable transition from radical democracy to revolutionary Marxism. Kautsky's identification of opportunism with pre-Marxist tendencies derived from the history of the European left in the decades following the revolutions of 1848. The principal tendency opposed to Marxism, e.g., Proudhonism, Lassalleanism, Bakuninism, all expressed the desire of the artisan class to prevent its descent into the industrial proletariat. Marx and Engels understood that artisan utopian socialism could not be defeated simply through propaganda and agitation, but required the actual development of capitalist society. It was recognized in the Second International that Marxism superseded such primitivist tendencies as Lassalleanism in Germany and Proudhonism in France, primarily through the transformation of the urban artisan classes into a modern proletariat. The process by which Marxism overcame Lassalleanism, Proudhonism, Bakuninism, etc., became for Kautsky a paradigm of the success against opportunism in general. The view of reformism as a historic lag or regression accounts for Kautsky's limited aims in the revisionist controversy with Bernstein. He drew a sharp line between naive pre-Marxist reformists like Jaurès and the conscious revisers of Marxism. In a letter of 23 May 1902 to Victor Adler, Kautsky defended the Belgian socialist leadership from the charge of revisionism on the grounds that they were never Marxists to begin with, nor did they pretend to be. I maintain an entirely unprejudiced attitude towards them. The talk about their revisionism leaves me cold. They have nothing to revise, for they have no theory. The eclectic, vulgar socialism to which the revisionists would like to reduce Marxism is something beyond which they, the Belgian socialists, have not even begun to advance. Proudhon, Schaffel, Marx, it is all one to them. It was always like that. They have not retrogressed in theory, and I have nothing to reproach them with. Hold on one second. Kautsky's aim in the revisionist controversy was not to purge the Second International of reformist tendencies or even practices, but preserve the doctrinal integrity of the Marxist camp. If this were achieved, believed Kautsky, the development of the class struggle would eventually ensure the triumph of revolutionary social democracy. Kautsky located the weakness of revolutionary social democracy in the backwardness of the proletariat, which reflected either a continued identification with the petty bourgeoisie or a lack of confidence in the strength of the workers' movement. To a large degree, hatched out of the small capitalist and small farmer class, many proletarians long carry the shells of these classes about with them. They do not feel themselves proletarians, but as would-be property owners. Others, again, have gone further and have come to recognize the necessity of fighting the capitalists that stand in antagonism to them, but do not feel themselves secure enough and strong enough to declare war on the entire capitalist system. These look to capitalist parties and governments for relief. For Kautsky, the growth of the proletariat, of the trade unions, etc., strengthened the objectively revolutionary forces in society. What was required of social democracy was a patient pedagogical attitude towards backward workers, although Kautsky also recognized that class consciousness could leap ahead during a revolutionary crisis. And with the partial exception of Luxembourg, no pre-war social democrat located the main source of reformism in the conservatism of a socially privileged bureaucracy created by the growth and strength of the labor movement, of the social democratic parties, and their trade union affiliates. Lenin's sociological analysis of Menshevism. Lenin, following Kautsky's methodology, regarded Menshevism as an extension of the 19th century petty bourgeois radicalism into the workers' movement. Because he considered the Mensheviks an intellectualist tendency, in a sense standing outside of the workers' movement, he could split from them without positing the existence of two competing social democratic parties, the one revolutionary, the other reformist. Lenin was convinced that the growth of social democratic organization among the Russian proletariat would ensure the triumph of Bolshevism. Lenin regarded the 1903 Martovite grouping as an expression of the attitudes and values of the old freewheeling individualistic revolutionary intelligentsia, as a rebellion of the circle spirit against the construction of a real workers' party. Workers' party. I don't know what that was. I said it weird, right, at some point, and then I was like, sorry. What am I doing? I often have this issue where I can't help but look at myself looking at stuff. I don't know. It's a type of reflexivity or something. I get caught in reflexivity like real bad sometimes. It's crazy. Ever since I was a kid, honestly. But anyways, let's not worry about that. Lenin, following Kautsky's methodology, regarded Menshevism as an extension of the 19th century petty bourgeois radicalism into the workers' movement. Because he considered the Mensheviks an intellectualist tendency, in a sense standing outside of the workers' movement, he could split from them without positing the existence of two competing social democratic parties. And the one revolutionary and the other reformist. Interesting. Lenin was convinced that the growth of social democratic organization among the Russian proletariat would ensure the triumph of Bolshevism. Lenin regarded the 1903 Martovite grouping as an expression of the attitudes and values of the old freewheeling individualistic revolutionary intelligentsia, as a rebellion of the circle spirit against the construction of a real workers' party. Right. Nonetheless, we regard the party's quoting Lenin here. Nonetheless, we regard the party's sickness as a matter of growing pains. We consider that the underlying cause of the crisis is the transition from the circle form to party forms of the life of social democracy. The essence of its internal struggle is a conflict between the circle spirit and the party spirit, and consequently, only by shaking off the sickness can our party become a real party. Lastly, the opposition cadres have in general been drawn chiefly from those elements of our party which consist primarily of intellectuals. The intelligentsia is always more individualistic than the proletariat, owing to its very conditions of life and work, which do not directly involve a large-scale combination of efforts, do not directly educate it through organized collective labor. The intellectual elements therefore find it harder to adapt themselves to the discipline of party life, and those of them who are not equal to it naturally raise the standard of revolt against the necessary organizational limitations. To the party. Lenin likewise analyzed Menshevik liquidationism during the 1908 to 1912 period, opposition to the underground party, in terms of intellectuals versus the proletariat. The first The first to flee from the underground were the bourgeois intellectuals who succumbed to the counter-revolutionary mood, those fellow travelers of the social democratic working class movement who, like those in Europe, had been attracted by the liberating role played by the proletariat in the bourgeois revolution. It is a well-known fact that a mass of Marxists left the underground after 1905 and found places for themselves in all sorts of legal corners for intellectuals. Lenin's sociological analysis of Menshevism was valid as far as it went. The Mordovite grouping in 1903 did represent, in part, the habits of the old revolutionary intelligentsia. One thinks of Vera Saslik in this regard. Menshevik liquidationism did represent, in part, the fleeing of intellectuals from the RSDRP toward bourgeois respectability during a period of reaction. But Menshevism was not primarily a tendency external to the labor movement. The Russian Mensheviks anticipated the labor reformism of the Second International as a whole, including particularly its mass parties. It was only during World War I, in the studies which led to imperialism, that Lenin located the source of social democratic opportunism within the workers' movement, in a labor bureaucracy, resting in the upper stratum of the working class. What is that? Iskraism. Iskraism. Organized Russian Marxism originated in 1883 when Plekhanov broke from the dominant populist current to form the Tiny Exile Emancipation of Labor Group. During the late 1880s, early 1890s, Marxism in Russia consisted of localized propaganda circles designated to educate a thin layer of advanced workers. In the mid-1890s, the Marxist propaganda circles turned toward mass agitation, intersecting a major strike wave. This turn was in part inspired by the Jewish Bund. Ethnic solidarity enabled the Jewish Marxist intelligentsia to reach and organize Jewish workers in advance of Russian social democracy as a whole. In part because of the imprisonment of the more experienced Marxist leaders, e.g., Lenin, Martov, the turn towards mass agitation rapidly degenerated into reformism. This tendency, dubbed economism by a hostile Plekhanov, limited its agitation to elementary trade union demands, while passively supporting the bourgeois liberal efforts to reform Tsarist absolutism. In terms of international social democracy, the economists were hostile to orthodox Marxism and consequently were loosely associated with the Bernsteinism in Germany and possibilism in France. In the later 1890s, economism was the dominant tendency among Russian social democrats. In 1900, the second generation of Russian Marxists, Lenin, Martov, coalesced with the founding fathers, Plekhanov, Axelrod, Zasulik, to return Russian social democracy to its revolutionary traditions, as embodied in the original Emancipation of Labor program. The revolutionary Marxist tendency was organized around the paper Iskra. Iskrism. Lenin was the organizer of the Iskra group. He ran the agents in Russia whose task was to win over the local social democratic committees, or, if necessary, split them. Iskra provided for the first time an organizing center for our Russian Social Democratic Party. In polemicizing against Lenin's successfully splitting tactics, the economists pointed out that the German center did not seek to exclude the Bernsteinians. Lenin did not, and in a sense could not, argue for the exclusion of opportunists from the Social Democratic Party as a principle. Rather, he justified his splitting tactics by a series of arguments based on the particularities of the Russian party situation. Right up to World War I, Lenin would appeal to one or another aspect of the Russian particularism to justify constructing a programmatically homogeneous revolutionary vanguard. What were Lenin's arguments for building the RSDRP? Without and against the economists. The German party had strong revolutionary traditions and an authoritative leadership. The Russian party was embryonic and could easily fall prey to opportunism. The German leadership, Bebel, Kautsky, were revolutionary while the Bernsteinians were a small minority. In contrast, the economists were temporarily the dominant trend in Russian social democracy. The German revisionists accepted party discipline. The Russian economists were incapable of accepting party discipline. In any case, the RSDRP did not exist as a centralized organization. These arguments are presented in What is to be Done, 1902. The important thing to note is that the opportunist attitude towards revolutionary social democrats in Russia is the very opposite of that in Germany. In Germany, revolutionary social democrats are in favor of preserving what is. They stand in favor of the old program and tactics which are universally known. The critics desire to introduce change, and as these critics represent an insignificant minority, and as they are very shy and haltered in their revisionist efforts, one can understand the motives of the majority in confining themselves to the dry rejection of innovation. In Russia, however, it is the critics and economists who are in favor of what is. The critics wish us to continue to regard them as Marxists and to guarantee them the freedom of criticism which they enjoyed to the full. For, as a matter of fact, they never recognized any kind of party ties, and moreover, we never had a generally recognized party organ which could restrict freedom of criticism even by giving advice. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. It is generally recognized, as is generally recognized, Lenin's 1902 "What is to be done" was the authoritative statement of Iskarism. Despite his supposed sympathy towards Lenin, Cliff is too much a workerist and Menshevik to accept what is to be done. In fact, a central purpose of his biography is to argue that the 1902 polemic is an exaggerated one-sided statement, which in substance Lenin subsequently repudiated. First, Cliff vulgarizes Lenin's position and then polemicizes against his own strawman creation. All right, so here reading Cliff quotes. In general, the dichotomy between economic and political struggle is foreign to Marx. An economic demand, if it is sectional, is defined as economic in Marxist terms. But if the same demand is made of the state, it is political. In many cases, economic sectional struggles do not give rise to political class-wide struggles. But there is no Chinese wall between the two, and many economic struggles do spill over into political ones. This exchange of terms between the term sectional and economic with Cliff is very mysterious to me, and I do not understand what that means, or why it's like that. Seems strange to me, but okay. One moment. Hello. Okay. All right. I'm back. But you could pause a live stream. It'd be nice. I wouldn't mind that. I had some people had to come in. They didn't have their keys, so I had to go let them in. But yeah, my makeup is not great today. Nah, I tried something a little different than my usual stuff, and I don't think it really works very well. Oh well. If there's one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, it's how if the only way to get better at something is that you have to practice it every day, and that you have to, I mean, that's the first step. You have to do it every day, or not, or like consistently, not necessarily every day, but it has to be like relatively consistent. And so it has to be consistent. You have to do it regularly. And then 2, you have to be able to, what's it called? Expand your technique. So in order to get good at anything, you have to regularly practice, and you have to expand your technique. You have to try different things, more complicated or unfamiliar things. And so, yeah, I was trying to play around with a color eyeshadow, and I just don't think that what I did works very well for me. Yeah, I mean, it's all right. It's not good. It's not great. There is a difference between something being all right and something being great. And for me, I think about this a lot with food, or like just even just like tasting a beer or tasting a wine or tasting a tea or something, or some coffee. In general, or making food, eating food. I mean, that's probably like obviously what I talk about. With food, right? Like you have to, if you are striving for some kind of excellence in flavor, in the flavor profile of a dish, you want to make sure that there is a level of harmony between the different elements involved in the flavor profile that you're creating. Because what happens is that certain flavors layer on top of other flavors, and in combination create new experiences, or new kinds of like flavors, or like a flavor that only exists, or something. I don't know if it's really a flavor, but it's like, and sometimes it's not really a flavor, it's just the experience of the difference between two flavors that then elicits a kind of like how do I even word this? Because like I don't think it's that you actually I guess it's like creating a new flavor, but like I'll give a good example is that when you have something really sweet with something really bitter, and when you're tasting it, when you're eating it, you experience both the bitterness and the sweetness. And in experiencing both the bitterness and the sweet, it's not like when they mix together in your mouth, they cancel each other out or something. They don't. They're still there. But what happens is that together it produces a certain effect, an effect which I don't think exists within the combination itself. Maybe. But I think it exists within our perception of the combination. And it's the experience of the difference between the sweetness and the bitterness, which itself creates a different kind of experience, which is I think we find very pleasurable, which is like people like, coffee and creamer. People like, I mean, sometimes it is just to cover up the bitterness, but there's other elements to it too. I really like plain black tea and like a cookie or something. That is some good shit right there. Plain black tea, no sweetener. Or if you do use a sweetener, nothing too sweet, nothing, because you want that strong, bitter kind of flavor profile. And then you have some of the cookie, which then creates this wonderful kind of mixture in the mouth. So it's that, like, I wouldn't say that's an example of harmony. That's an example of maybe synergy, or the effect that there is an effect of the two that create, that is like a byproduct that can't be reduced to either component by itself. And then there's like a harmony, which is really cool. Like you can create like really beautiful harmonies of flavor, which is where, for instance, you have, what's it called? There you have, sorry, I'm just thinking about how I got I'm not reading. I'm distracted by talking about food, but we'll finish this up. Sometimes you have flavors that you want to layer on top of each other. They don't cancel out each other, but they don't overpower each other, and they come through at different intensities and different, like, you experience them only subtly in combination with each other. And so, for instance, it's like creating a gradient, right? Or a rainbow, but of things that generally go together. You don't want, because we're not trying to, when we're trying to create a harmony of flavors, I think that you're trying to like stretch the complexity of the flavor experience. And so you're adding in flavors that then work with and add to the existing flavors, usually following a certain kind of theme, a certain type of like theme. And you can use some flavors, you can stretch it. You could stretch it where you're almost doing something that kind of is, it's almost getting to the point of something that is like a conflicting flavor. And that can add a lot of excitement to a flavor profile. But if you don't do it the right way, it's just going to make it taste confusing, or like, or just, it'll make it, it loses a certain type of like, it loses something. Anyways, I'm going off on this really big rant about food, and I should be reading, this wonderful communist literature. And so what's it called? Point is, I don't think the makeup I've gone on right now has like good synergy. I think I could do something better. Anyways, let's get back to this. Lenin did not attack, so like this is responding to that quote from Cliff. Lenin did not attack the economists for being indifferent to governmental policy. The Russian economists agitated for state-initiated economic reforms. All right, hold on. Lenin did not attack the economists for being indifferent to governmental policy. Russian economists agitated for state-initiated economic reforms and supported democratic rights, particularly the right to organize. In this purpose, they passively supported the liberals. In What Is to Be Done, Lenin attacks the economists' political program as encapsulated in the slogan, giving the economic struggle itself a political character. Giving the economic struggle itself a political character means, therefore, striving to secure satisfaction for these trade demands, the improvement of conditions of labor in each separate trade by means of legislative and administrative measures. This is exactly what the trade unions do and have always done. Thus, the pompous phrase, give the economic struggle itself a political character, which sounds so terrifically profound and revolutionary, serves as a screen to conceal what is, in fact, the traditional striving to degrade social democratic politics to the level of trade union politics. Mm, mm. For Lenin, political class consciousness or socialist consciousness was the recognition by the proletariat of the need to become the ruling class and reconstruct society on socialist foundations. Anything less was trade union consciousness. Like all other currents, workerists and social democrats, Cliff must attack Lenin's famous statement that socialist consciousness is brought to the workers from without by revolutionary intellectuals, that political class consciousness does not arise simply through the proletarian struggle to improve its conditions. Here are Cliff's fatuous remarks on this question. Let's see, hold on. Right. There is no doubt that this formulation overemphasized the difference between spontaneity and consciousness. For, in fact, the complete separation of spontaneity from consciousness is mechanical and non-dialectical. Lenin, as we shall see later, admitted this. Pure spontaneity does not exist in life. The logic of the mechanical juxtaposition of spontaneity and consciousness was the complete separation of the party from the actual elements of the working class leadership already risen in the struggle. It presumed that the party had answers to all the questions that spontaneous struggle might bring forth. The blindness of this embattled many is the obverse of the omniscience of the few. All right, it is important to quote Lenin's statement in full to understand what it means and does not mean. We said that there could not yet be social democratic consciousness among the workers. This consciousness could only be brought to them from without. The history of all countries shows that the working class exclusively by its own effort, is able to develop only trade union consciousness, i.e., it may itself realize the necessity of combining in unions, for fighting against the employers, and for striving to compel the government to pass necessary labor legislation. The theory of socialism, however, grew out of the philosophic, historical, and economic theories that were elaborated by the educated representatives of the propertied classes, the intellectuals. According to their social status, the founders of modern scientific socialism, Marx and Engels, themselves belonged to the bourgeois intelligentsia. Similarly, in Russia, the theoretical doctrine of social democracy arose quite independently of the spontaneous growth of the labor movement. It arose as a natural and inevitable outcome of the development of ideas among the revolutionary socialist intelligentsia. It is not a programmatic statement, but rather a historical analysis with implications for the organizational question. The socialist movement predated the development of mass economic organizations of the industrial proletariat. The socialist movement arose out of the bourgeois democratic revolutionary currents, the Babaovist tradition, represented by Blanchism in France and the League of the Just in Germany. Except for Britain, the earliest trade unions arose through the transformation of the old mercantilist artisan guild system. For example, in the German Revolution of 1848, Stephen Born's mass trade union movement, the Workers' Brotherhood, was largely based on the traditional guild structure. The leaders of the embryonic trade unions were generally the traditional authority figures of the plebeian community. Methodist ministers, like the Tory radical J.R. Stephens, played a significant leadership role in the early 19th century British workers' movement. Catholic priests played a similar role in the first French trade unions. The example among the rebellious silk workers of Lyons. In most countries, the emergence of the socialist labor movement resulted from the political victory of the revolutionary intelligentsia over the traditionalist leaders of the early workers' organizations. When Lenin wrote What is to be Done, the mass economic organizations of the Russian working class were the police-led unions, whose most prominent leader was the priest Gepon. Gepon. What an interesting name. Gepon. Lenin was a dialectician who understood that the consciousness of the leadership of the working class underwent qualitative changes historically, with the important exception of the U.S. trade union economism associated with bourgeois liberal illusions and religious obscurantism is no longer the dominant ideology of the world's proletariat. In the advanced capitalist countries, it is socialist reformism carried through the social democratic and Stalinist labor bureaucracies which binds the working class to the bourgeois order. In backward countries, populist nationalism with a socialist coloration, Peronism, Nasserism, is the characteristic form of bourgeois ideological dominance over the working masses. In the Russia of 1902, a small homogeneous Marxist vanguard composed of declassed individuals with a thin layer of advanced workers was able to break the mass of the workers from police trade unionism and the Orthodox Church. Today, it requires an international Trotskyist vanguard, necessarily composed in its first stages of declassed intellectuals with relatively few advanced workers, to break the world's working classes from the domination of social democratic and Stalinist reformism and populist nationalism. In exactly the opposite sense of Cliff, what is to be done cannot be regarded as the definite Leninist statement on the party question. Despite the angularity of its formulations in 1902, the 1902 polemic work does not go beyond the bounds of orthodox pre-1914 social democracy. If this work has represented a radical break with social democracy, Plekhanov, Martov et al. Would never have endorsed it. It was only after the split in 1903 that Martov, Axelrod, and other Menshevik leaders discovered in What Is to Be Done alleged substitutionalist and Blanquist conceptions. It was Lenin's intransigent attitude in practice towards opportunism, circle spirit, cliquism, and all obstacles to building a revolutionary RSDRP that caused the Menshevik split, not particularly the ideas expressed in What Is to Be Done. If Cliff finds What Is to Be Done to Leninists for his liking, it is because his hostility to Bolshevism is so strong that he must reject Lenin, even when the latter was still a revolutionary social democrat. In reality, the 1902 work is an anticipation, not a full-blown exposition, of post-1917 communism. It is common in left-wing circles to regard What Is to Be Done as the definitive Leninist statement on the party question. For example, the American Shachtmanite Bruce Landau, in a critical review of Cliff's biography, Revolutionary Marxist Papers, number 8, concentrates on the Iskra period. He justifies this narrow focus by quoting Trotsky on Lenin's development. It was precisely during this short time that Lenin became the Lenin he was to remain. This does not mean that he did not develop further. On the contrary, he grew in stature until October and after, but this was really organic growth. Trotsky's here is referring to the development of Lenin's political personality, not to his ideas, and their programmatic expression. The decisive period for the development of Lenin's communist doctrine was 1914 to 1917, not 1900 to 1903. Okay. Oh, God. I'm just looking at how long this is. It's so long. I feel like tired just looking at this is making me feel very, very tired. I think I'm going to end here, and I'm going to start again tomorrow morning. Hopefully that goes better.